So, Maman Brigitte is here, and she is probably my favorite release of the entire year. In fact, I think she might be my single most favorite release of this year. She is a mage, but she is intended to be a jungler. She is melee. She has an assassin style kit with like a bit of mage flavor, and she does magic damage and builds magical items. And she actually has quite a bit of a skill ceiling, I would say. Like, her skill floor is approachable enough, but her skill ceiling is a little bit higher than the average Smite god, I think. So, as someone who got a very, very tiny amount of experience with her before she came out, and I've been playing her quite a bit since she released, I thought I would do a little guide to help anyone who may be struggling to understand how to maximize the potential of Maman Brigitte, because she is very, very satisfying to play well and very frustrating to play badly. That's the fun of goofing around in Smite. Anyway, let's get into it.
Now this should turn some heads.
So, to begin with her ability rundown, we have to look at her passive. Her passive is Soul Spikes, and what this does is every time Maman deals damage with an ability or a basic attack, she will generate a spike that floats next to the enemy. This can apply to gods, minions, monsters, bosses, everything. It stacks up to 5 times, and when she reaches a 5th stack, the spikes will impale her target, dealing magical damage, scaling off of the target's missing health. Note, this is not missing health damage strictly, it is magical power scaling based off of missing health. As of release, this is 1%. Per 1% missing health, and it caps at 70% of Maman's magical power. This is subject to change. I'm doing this video on release, so just make sure you check her tooltips to see what the current numbers are. It's very likely that Maman will be nerfed following release because she is very strong right now. Now, when it comes to applying soul spikes, like I said earlier, you can do this with basic attacks, or you can do it with ability ticks, and this is every single tick Maman does, not just once per ability. So if I tag beneath with a dot, she takes 4 ticks, she gets 4 spikes. I tag her again, she gets impaled by my first application of soul spikes, and then she starts taking more spikes, etc. And you can see the damage from my passive is getting stronger and stronger as she loses HP.
Now it's a party.
There's nothing really super crazy you need to memorize about her passive. Just know that it's kind of like an automatic thing that happens as you're DPSing people with Maman Brigitte. It does make her very effective against tanks because she's able to maximize that missing health scaling a lot better. It kind of starts off a bit rough because tanks just naturally have more HP, but the lower and lower the enemy tank gets, they really start to get chunked by the passive.
I'll take over from here, child.
Maman's passive plays into the rest of her kit. It is her main damage source, so let's cover the rest of the kit.
Bartender!
Alright, so Maman's first ability is Party Trick. This is the Fire Breath that I showed earlier. Now, this is a very interesting ability. It is a recastable toggle ability that also has a second activation phase. So when you use it initially, I have everything on instant cast. So I'll just show on normal cast, you just have the cone. When you use the ability, you start breathing fire, and it applies a ticking damage over time effect. Normally, if you just use the ability and then leave it, Maman Brigitte will just drain her entire rum meter, which you see on the passive, and then when she runs out of rum, she will slam the glass into the ground. And when she slams the glass, it does damage and applies a stun. One of the most important parts of playing Maman Brigitte is managing the usage of your wand and managing your rum. So at any point after casting Party Trick, you can right click or use your equivalent cancel input if you're on console to cancel Party Trick. And you'll notice the Odins keep ticking damage after I stop using Party Trick. That's because this Fire Breath does not actually deal damage directly in the same way an Anubis ult would do damage or a Bacchus burp would do damage. This cone is a debuff applicator Any enemies inside this cone have a debuff applied, which then does damage over time. So you don't need to channel the fire breath for a long time. You just need to hit an enemy with the fire breath once, apply the debuff, and then cancel to conserve your rum. It's important to not get carried away doing this because you'll see Party Trick costs mana every single time you use it. So if I go crazy, cancelling and reactivating, I just burn through all of my mana. See how I've lost almost my entire mana bar just from a single ability. You do not want to go super crazy, constantly reactivating this ability. You gotta kind of play her, get a feel for her damage numbers, and know how many times you need to reapply the dot before it's safe to just consume the ability and get that stun. Speaking of, the stun does not only happen when she runs out of rum. You can reactivate this ability at any point while breathing fire to use the stun early. This can be done two ways. You can left click or use your attack input, like so. Or you can press the ability button again, which on PC would normally be 1. On console would be one of the shape buttons or the letter buttons. I do not play SMITE on console, so I apologize. I do not know which ability A or 1 is. But yes, if you press the ability again, that also reactivates the ability for a stun. There's another element to fuel management with Maman Brigitte, and that is the cooldown of Party Trick. The cooldown of Party Trick actually scales with the amount of rum you have in your bottle. If you instantly reactivate Party Trick, it is on a very long cooldown. That is about 14 seconds. Yes. As you can see on the tooltip, maximum cooldown is 14 seconds, further reduced by CDR. So it's fairly punishing to just instant stun people. You lose quite a bit of extra tick damage, and your Party Trick is on a very long cooldown. So it's generally a good idea to prepare for an engagement or prepare for a gank by sort of draining your rum. You know, you're clearing camps, you're roaming the jungle. You don't want to constantly be using the stun on camps if you don't need to. And you kind of want to hover about 40, 35 rum when you're going in to fight someone, because when you actually gank, you can just breathe the fire on them, cancel, get the stun, and then the cooldown is significantly lower. It is so low when you use it with 0 rum. One of the more high skill aspects of Party Trick is also basic attack cancelling. So if you're not familiar with the concept of basic attack cancelling, I know a lot of people are, but I'm trying to make this as accessible as possible. Basic attack cancelling is where you weave basic attacks in between ability casts, and Maman Brigitte is excellent at basic attack cancelling. As you can see, let's see if hopefully I don't mess this up. Yeah, it was fairly clean. I consumed a little bit more rum than I could have. That gets a little bit more difficult with your latency, depending on where you live, how far away the servers are. So really just, I would recommend going into a custom game and just getting a feel for your own ping, and then try to learn your auto attack cancels on ping, because, well, you'll be playing on ping. You won't be playing on 0 ping local client. Now the auto attack cancelling might look like a lot of effort, but it's actually so much easier than it seems. The first step to DPSing with Party Trick is to hold in left click or your attack input. Just hold it down. You don't need to let go. And I would also recommend having Party Trick on instant cast, because that makes the entire process really smooth. You don't really need to see the pre-fire targeter at all. It doesn't really give you any necessary information. So definitely would recommend instacast. So the easy peasy auto attack cancel strategy for Maman Brigitte is to hold left click, keep it held down. Sorry, I'll say attack. Hold attack, keep it held down, and just Party Trick cancel, Party Trick cancel, Party Trick cancel, Party Trick cancel. Your attack input will constantly be going, so you'll instantly basic attack after ending Party Trick, and it won't cause you to slam the rum down and waste it, because that's just how it works. The attack input does not bleed over into the ability and use it up. So it's really, really easy, accessible way to just learn the auto attack cancelling. So again, just for clarity, hold attack, keep it held down the entire time. Party trick, cancel, party trick, cancel, party trick, cancel, party trick, cancel, party trick, cancel. And then when you're ready to stun, just stun. It's important to know when it's safe to auto attack cancel as well. Usually when you're clearing jungle camps, you really do want to be auto attack cancelling because it's a massive amount of extra DPS, especially with like a Bumba's hammer or Bumba's dagger. Sorry. So you go to a camp. I don't know how squishy this camp will be. It's 16 minutes, so it should be pretty tanky. Yeah. And doing this constant basic attack cancelling and maximizing your DPS will allow you to reduce the amount of times you have to waste rum and react and like recycle the rum. So you can really work on clearing jungle, getting yourself some farm, entering a lane with, you know, low rum, and then you slam the stun down, you get a reduced cooldown, and it's all great. It's all great. As you can see, Party Trick is a very layered ability. There are lots of layers to its mechanics, how to use it, how to maximize it, optimize your playstyle with it. And that's definitely what I would consider Maman Brigitte's main ability. It is definitely like the most important part of her skill ceiling and just learning how to be efficient with her. Now that we have it out the way though, why don't we move on to the rest of her kit?
Madame!
Okie dokie. So the second ability is Madame Fangs. This is a zigzagging projectile. You send out a snake. It does a bit of a wiggle. It damages any enemy contacts. And I'll just tag the Odin once. Takes 130 damage. And you see there's a skull. That skull is called Madame's Mark. And when an enemy is affected by Madame's Mark, they receive a damage tick duplication effect. You can see Madame's Mark damage 5 plus, that is 5% scaling. And basically what this duplication effect is, anytime you do basic attack or ability damage, not item damage, and I don't know if I mentioned before in the passive section, the passive also does not stack off of item damage. So it's just basic attacks and raw abilities. Anytime you do a damage tick to a target with Madame's Mark, you do an extra tick of damage. So every single tick of damage you're doing is applying 2 soul spikes, which causes your passive to proc twice as often. It is a massive, massive DPS spike. And you become very, very, very dangerous to anyone who's affected by this mark. Late game, you know, 30 plus minutes, you will obliterate anyone who's affected by Madame's Mark. There's just very little they can do about it because you shred through them with all of your soul spike applications. Madame Fangs can also hit multiple times, which is really helpful because it marks, it does damage, it marks, and then the extra hits apply extra soul spikes. So if you can like sort of get up close to someone and do a little wiggle, it's a lot of extra spikes, which helps trigger your passive. The extra hits do a really heavily reduced damage. It's only 15% of the initial damage, but Maman does not care about how hard she hits. She just wants to hit you often. And that's like the entire design of this character, is just hitting people with as many damage ticks as possible. Just to demonstrate how impactful Madame's Mark is, I'm going to DPS this Guan Yu. First without using Madame Fangs. Took a while to kill him, right? And now we apply Madame Fangs. You can kind of see it basically just doubles your damage output. Not in a literal sense, but it doubles your passive procs. It's very helpful.
Don't mind if I do.
Right, time to move on to another pretty iconic ability, Spirit Seize. This is a dash. Pretty simple, just line dash. Pretty basic line dash. It does damage to everything you pass through. If you hit a god, you hop inside them and you possess them. Possessing doesn't actually like allow you to take control or anything. It's just a untargetability state. So you basically just hide inside someone for a little bit.
Don't mind if I do.
When the ability times out, you dash again out of the target, or you can dash again early by reactivating the ability. And you might be thinking, well, that's a bit awkward because what if I haven't killed the target? What if I want to be right next to them? Be right next to them so I can use my abilities and not be really far away and, you know, potentially have them escape. Well, that's when you use the cancel input instead of the reactivation input. If you cancel it with right click, or, you know, equivalent input, you will just pop out. You will not dash again. You will just pop out right next to them and you can continue wailing on them. Spirit Seize does do tick damage, which, you know, applies her passive, and it synergizes with Madame's Mark. So you can do a lot of damage to a target while being completely unhittable and essentially invincible as long as you don't have any damage over time effects on you. It's crazy. You must be careful when using this ability though, because if the enemy you possess enters any sort of untargetability state, like jumping, using a global ultimate that makes them airborne, an enemy knocks, shadow stepping into an ally, these untargetability effects will prevent you from escaping your target. You will be trapped inside your target until they become targetable again. So certain gods can use this to their advantage and just carry you out of position and get you murdered. Pretty hilariously at times. Knowing which gods can do this to you is really important. Be very careful with gods like Nox, Apollo, Thanatos, Thor, Ratatoska. There's probably some more I'm not thinking of at the moment. Even gods like Freya and Kamazots and Marticarus can also activate untargetability states, which can really be used to drag you out of position and ruin your day. Keep in mind, this is also your mobility. This is your dash. So if you get dragged out of position after using your dash, you are very much dead. You are very dead most of the time, unless you can just outplay your opponents. So yeah, pretty fun ability. Pretty obnoxious ability as well. People really don't like playing against this, in my experience. But let's move on.
Better move those feet now.
Right, finally is Maman Brigitte's ultimate, which is Explosion of Souls. This is a fairly standard, you know, circle ability with the delay. You conjure a big ball and just throw it. Simple stuff. So for the most part, this ability is pretty basic. It's just circle damage. It's not even a lot by mage ult standards, but it has some extra effects which are pretty cool. First of all, you might notice that's Madame's Mark. So Explosion of Souls also applies Madame's Mark. There are two different abilities in this kit that can apply the same tick duplication effect. So you can actually initiate a fight or a gank, or just, you know, contribute to a fight with Explosion of Souls, and that will apply Madame's Mark, so you don't always have to use the snake. It also has a small knock-up, so it is a little bit of crowd control, and one of the most important aspects is how it interacts with Maman Brigitte's passive. So up until now, I've been completely ignoring and glossing over the orbs that appear next to Maman Brigitte when you trigger soul spikes on an enemy god. These orbs are soul orbs, and they don't really have much of an interaction with Maman Brigitte's kit, but as you can see, Explosion of Souls is huge now. It is gigantic. That is because the size of this ability scales with the amount of soul orbs you have. That is what the soul orbs are for. They increase the size of your ultimate. So when you've done a little bit of passive proccing on the enemy players, you get a bunch of soul orbs, and the ability gets massive. And it becomes a lot harder to dodge. So if you can help it, you really want to kind of open up an engagement with some passive procs, you know, do a little bit of tick damage, get your passive, get some soul orbs, and then throw down the big girl ultimate, apply the mark, continue as normal, etc. Kill your enemy. So yeah, Maman Brigitte has a very cohesive kit. There's a lot of internal synergies between the abilities. She has lots of tick damage, 2 ways to duplicate her ticks, missing health damage. Like, she has a really cohesive and fun kit, in my opinion. There's also, like, not really a strict way to combine her abilities. You just kind of, like, do what feels right, I guess. You can never go wrong with sort of, like, initiating with her ult and then just going crazy, like...
Don't mind if I do. Don't you dare slow down.
And you don't have to do it in that order. There's any number of ways you can combine her abilities. One of the most insane late game kill combos is just to ult and then dash into someone. And that can basically melt any squishy if they're not Aegising. If they're not using Aegis or getting protected by a teammate, etc. The final thing I am going to just breeze over in this guide is items. I've seen some different takes on how this character should be built. Some I disagree with, some I agree with, etc. Blah blah blah. But I am going to share with you the build that I have been enjoying. So ignore the starter item, this is just a temporary slot filler. I'll talk about the starter item in a little bit. Generally, how I've been enjoying building Maman Brigitte is to start with my starter, my recipe. Recipes might be removed in the future, I just don't know. It's kind of like a seasonal thing. So if recipes aren't in the game, you know, just ignore this. But then anyway, I rush one of two items based on how I'm feeling. If I want to get greedy and I don't feel like I need sustain, like health sustain, I will go Chronos Pendant. And then I will get Bancroft's Talon for the out of combat sustain, a massive amount of power when I'm low on HP, and synergy with Typhon's Fang, which gives me extra power based on my lifesteal, which is a lot. If I want the sustain first, if I'm against a pork team comp, or I just feel like I'm going to lose a lot of health roaming around the map, I will go Bancroft's first, then Chronos Pendant. Cooldown reduction is imperative on Maman Brigitte. She feels incredible with full cooldown. So I think even if you don't really like the Bancroft's Talon idea, you should always consider Chronos Pendant. It is very, 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 very good on her. Anyway, after these two items, I will then decide, do I want to increase my sustain and increase my penetration, or do I want to just give myself raw damage? It's another choice, like kind of one or the other. So if I want to just get more sustain, because I really want to just like heal up a shit ton and get lots and lots and lots of power out of my Bancrofts, I'll get Typhon's next. 20% pen, bunch of power, extra mana, boosts your lifesteal, gives you power based on lifesteal. It's all around just very synergistic with this entire build. Then Staff of Merthin. What Staff of Merthin does is it gives you a 20% raw damage dealt increase after using your ultimate ability. And this applies to your magical power scaling and your base damage. You can initiate a fight or an engagement or just a skirmish with her ult and just dash inside someone and it will probably kill them, especially with that bonus damage. There is a little bit of a quirk with Merthin that I will discuss in just a moment. So at this point, we've got a bunch of sustain, cooldown. We're at 30% penetration from these two items. We're at 30% cooldown reduction from these two items. So you kind of just have the core of your build online. Now it really depends what your starter is. So let's talk about the starter. If you're jungling, I would pretty much always recommend starting with Bumba's Dagger, because Bumba's Spear is a goated item. It is incredible. This finishes off your percent penetration and your cooldown reduction. So now with Bumba's Spear upgraded, we're level 20. We have 40% penetration and 40% cooldown reduction. We are capped in two very important percent stats that Maman Brigitte needs. If you're playing non-conquest, you can instead get Sacrificial Shroud for more lifesteal, power scaling, just a bunch of raw damage. Bear in mind, it does not apply the damage increase to Party Trick, and it does not apply the damage increase to Soul Spikes. And it does cost HP, so you have to be a little careful. You can also get Gem of Focus. Maman Brigitte is not the best at stacking Gem of Focus, but it is another raw damage increase. You can also get Sands of Time, but you will overcap cooldown reduction with this particular build. So really just decide when you want your cooldown reduction. I recommend Chronos Pendant because I think you should rush your cooldown reduction ASAP. So I would prefer Vampiric Shroud or Conduit Gem and one of their upgrades instead, and not bother with Pendulum. Or I guess you could get Timeline if you want a little bit of safety, but I think Timeline is just a meme item. You can also get an Eye of the Jungle if you're jungling. Protector is pretty good. Seer is really good. It turns you into a walking sentry ward. But you need to supplement. You will lack either a little bit of penetration or a little bit of cooldown reduction because you only have one item slot left and there isn't really an item that can cover both stats. So, because Maman Brigitte is intended as a jungler, we will stick with the Bumba Spear.
For me?
So now, we are capped on percent penetration and cooldown reduction. So, what do we want next? We can kind of just get anything, right? You can get a Divine Ruin if you want anti-heal. Generally speaking, I've never really felt a need for Divine Ruin on Maman Brigitte because Party Trick is not able to apply it. You can apply it with these 3 abilities, but Party Trick cannot. And generally speaking, Maman Brigitte does so much damage that she's going to just completely melt anyone who doesn't use Aegis anyway. So you can kind of just focus the enemy healer and make them disappear. But if you just want the flat pen, you can get Divine Ruin. For a cheaper alternative, you can get Spear of Desolation. You will overcap your cooldown reduction with Bumba Spear. You'll hit 50% cooldown reduction, which is not ideal. But the flat cooldown resets on Deso passive are amazing. You should never underestimate them. It allows you to snowball fights really, really, really well. Soul Reaver is a no-no on this character. Again, her main damage is her passive, and her passive does not apply item effects. Rod of Tahuti, again, does not benefit her passive, does not benefit her party trick, so I would avoid Rod of Tahuti. It's very expensive for not much benefit. Ethereal Staff is a item I really like on Maman Brigitte. She is a melee range character, she needs to get in, and she kind of struggles to do that. Her biggest weakness is just a lack of ability to get in and out of fights. Once she's actually in the midst of a fight, she is incredibly powerful, but she kind of struggles getting in and out of them. This extra survivability, you know, the ability to steal HP from enemy players and having crowd control reduction, this could save your life and help you get around, just get in and out of fights and survive, right, once you've completely obliterated the enemy. So usually I find myself just going for an Ethereal Staff. It's a safe bet. Now you might be wondering, why no flat pen, right? Isn't Deso supposed to be one of the most OP mage items in the entire game? And I'll be honest, the reason why I don't buy flat pen on Maman Brigitte is because I just don't think she needs it. Her damage is insanely high. It is insanely high. She melts squishies with or without flat penetration, and tanks are usually the bigger threat to you anyway as an assassin, so I would rather just itemize percent pen and try to make tanks as killable as possible, especially right now because tanks are very strong in general in most game modes. Warriors are incredibly strong, and they have been for a while in year 10. So I just like to optimize for tank killing, and squishy killing just happens anyway. Things that are good against tanks usually tend to be good against squishies as well. As you can see. I know this is a bot, so enemy players are going to be much harder to kill, but like... Like, flat pen might have helped me kill a little bit faster. In fact, why don't we compare? Let's just compare for the sake of comparison.
Ain't nobody gonna stop you.
That barely made a difference. And I lost the survivability of E-Staff getting Deso. And the only reason I even killed that Neath was because I got an inconsistent extra tick of Spirit Seas. This is something I forgot to mention when I was talking about Spirit Seas, but sometimes you can trigger an extra damage tick when you dash out of the enemy. It is very inconsistent. It does not happen all the time.
Don't mind if I do.
You can see there, I did 4 ticks. The Odin. Sometimes when you dash out of an enemy, it can trigger a additional tick because your dash is hitting them again. See, there was an extra tick there, and it consumed my passive. But that extra tick does not always happen. And the only reason I even killed that Neath with the 2 ability combo is because I got that extra tick that I needed, and it triggered my passive. So in general, I just don't really feel a need for flat pen. I think her damage is fine without it. She obliterates basically anything in her path right now. Maybe if her damage is nerfed, flat pen will become more valuable. I just think in Maman Brigitte's current state, Flat pen is just bait. It is complete bait. I've seen some takes saying that Maman Brigitte needs like she just needs, oh, I'm in god mode, sorry. She just needs raw power and flat pen to be good. It's the only way she's good is with raw power and flat pen, and I just disagree. I think percent penetration is the way to go. Lifesteal, yes, it can be anti-healed. You're not really building it for god combat. You're building it for the ability to just get in and out of fights and not have to back all the time. If you gank someone and you get out with like no HP, you know, and you don't have to back. You can just heal up. One of the most important parts of lifesteal on Maman Brigitte, by the way, is soul spikes can lifesteal. You can lifesteal off of soul spikes damage, and it is counted as single target lifesteal. Magical lifesteal is usually reduced by 2/3 to account for most magical characters being area of effect and doing area of effect damage. However, Maman Brigitte's passive is counted as single target damage, so you benefit from the entirety of your magical lifesteal when you proc soul spikes. It is very good. And you can see I'm lifestealing less because my Bancrofts is not stacked, but like the Bumbers heal combined with lifesteal just allows Maman Brigitte to gank, farm, heal up, gank, heal up, gank, heal up. It's so nice. Finally, since this is a Staff of Myrddin build, I am just going to warn you. Staff can be a little quirky on Maman Brigitte's ultimate. Staff of Myrddin gives you the damage boost when your ultimate goes on cooldown, save for a few exceptions on like certain gods. But generally, this activates when your ult goes on cooldown. Maman Brigitte's ult has a scaling travel time based on how close it is to her. So if you point blank the ultimate, it goes off basically instantly. And I did 728. But if I refresh my cooldown, and then I repurchase Myrddin to refresh that cooldown, and then I send the ult out max range, it now does 873. So you can see the short range ult did not benefit from the Myrddin damage boost. That is because my ult did damage before it went on cooldown, so it didn't benefit. I've done a little bit of testing to find the optimal distance, and I think anything after the 30 unit marking on the ruler is safe. So there. Generally, anything after the 30 unit marking is safe to benefit from Myrddin. If you do it any shorter range, you're very likely to not benefit from this damage boost, and it is a significant damage boost. So just keep that in mind. I would really recommend playing with the ruler on when you're playing this god. So that is my Maman Brigitte guide. I hope you guys enjoyed it. I hope you found it informative. And most of all, I hope this improves your experience playing as Maman. Let me know if you enjoyed this video. Let me know if you found it helpful. Let me know if it's helped you do better as Maman. And finally, I would like to just shout out Advanced GG, with whom I am partnered. They are an excellent energy supplement made with natural caffeine, and they have delicious flavors. It is my preferred way to energize myself on a morning now, instead of coffee, which kind of makes me ill and makes me feel woozy and yucky. Advanced GG just allows me to hydrate, get some caffeine, get on with everything I have to do. Very nice, and I would really recommend checking them out in the description. I also have an affiliate code that you can use, which is Luna. You've been seeing it on screen. That can get you 10% off your order if you decide you like what you see and want to try it. It would also support me directly, which I would appreciate greatly. And finally, feel free to follow my social medias displayed on screen. My Twitter is lunatic_. Twitch is also lunatic_, and my YouTube, well, you're on my YouTube now, but if you'd like to subscribe, I would very much appreciate it. Leave a like, leave a comment, all that shit. Like that, I will see you next I see you. Goodbye.